end up falling in love with jazz? I mean, was it like Oscar Peterson, listening to those classic recordings and just
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, so my grandparents played me a Sinatra video one day, and I immediately became obsessed with Sinatra and the whole Rat Pack, but Sinatra specifically. And still, like, that's, to me, that's perfect music. Whenever I really need to listen to something or go back to, something to compare it to, or just need to clear my head, I mean, it's perfect music. There's not much more I could say about it.
Yeah.
So I've always been obsessed with Sinatra for as long as I've known about it. And as I was exploring more of the Rat Pack and the musicians that he was around and he associated himself with, I found the Tony Bennett and Bill Evans albums.
Oh yeah.
And when I heard Bill Evans play, I was like, wow, I play piano. This is really what I want to do, or I want to try to play like this.
Hey everybody, it's Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, ChicagoJazz.com, and welcome to another Around Town. Today, this is pretty exciting. I have Brandon Goldberg. He is, according to the press release, but I think just reading about him, he's a piano prodigy. He's been performing and playing since he was 3 years old. And he is coming into Chicago this Sunday, December 4th. He's going to be performing, of course, with the legendary Chicago Jazz Orchestra at the Studebaker Theater. They are doing a musical tribute to A Charlie Brown Christmas. And Brandon's going to be the star of the show, because all of you that are familiar with the Charlie Brown Christmas know that Vince Guaraldi was the star of the show. So Brandon's playing the Vince Guaraldi part with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, which is going to be very exciting. And, let's talk a little bit. Brandon, first of all, welcome to Around Town. Welcome to Chicago Jazz. And thank you so much for jumping on real fast this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the show first specifically. Chicago Jazz Orchestra. I know everybody watching this program in Chicago knows all about the Chicago Jazz Orchestra. They're always doing very unique things. And I know Jeff Lindberg fairly well. And I know we talked about the Charlie Brown Christmas and having the orchestra do something at some point. He was talking about trying to put something together. So I'm glad he was able to put something together. Now, have you ever performed this show with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra? Or is this a whole new undertaking for you as well?
I've never performed this with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, but Jeff and I did this in 2019 at Worcester College, where he also runs the music program there. We played this program in 2019, and I'm so glad and so happy that he asked me to do it again in Worcester, and it's a real honor to be playing with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra for the first time.
So let me ask you this, because, I'm familiar, I'm sure everybo's familiar with the Charlie Brown Christmas music, and it's a jazz trio, and then there's vocalists and things like that involved. Now, this is a, 18-piece big band along with piano. I mean, how is this just an enlarged arrangements of the Charlie Brown Christmas music, or is this more of a tribute to the Charlie Brown Christmas? It's a little different.
It's kind of a tribute. I mean, obviously it takes a lot of influence, and Jeff wrote some incredible arrangements of the original Vince Guaraldi songs and the melodies that we all know and love. But there's definitely some creative liberties that he's taken, and they were incredible arrangements last time. So I can't wait to hear them again and can't wait to play them again.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk a little bit about you and how you know Jeff. Now, reading up on your bio, I mean, you've got 2 recordings out. You've toured all over the world. You've played all of the major jazz clubs. I mean, everybody would know all these jazz clubs: Blue Note, Dizzy's, all these different places. How did you connect with Jeff originally? Because Jeff's in Chicago, Jeff's at Worcester College down south of here, and everybody knows Jeff, but how did you end up connecting with Jeff and starting to collaborate with him?
So I met Jeff at Patton Allen Harris's open house that they do around January. I believe it's the second week of January every year, right before the APAP weekend. Okay. And the APAP showcase is, everybody who wants to be discovered and who wants to be booked tries to get in there and try to play. And then there's bookers and people who are interested in bringing those artists in. So I met Jeff at Patton Allen Harris's get together the night before all the APAP stuff began. And Jeff heard me play and he reached out to me, and I'm so grateful that he did. And I'm so glad that we not only did this once, but we're doing this again.
Yeah, the thing I love about Jeff is that he takes on big challenges. I mean, he transcribes. He's one of the top, obviously arrangers and transcribers, and and just proponents of the music in the entire world, I think. And we're
Yeah.
glad to have him here in Chicago. But he also always thinks creatively and thinks outside the box, So I love the fact that he heard you play and said, you know what, we need to collaborate in some way. And that sounds a lot like Jeff. So I mean, that first of all is really exciting. Now let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, you started playing when you were 3. You've got
Yeah.
2 recordings out. You obviously have your own trio quartet, I would assume, and you're traveling, but you're also like in high school, I assume, right? Because you're 17.
Yeah, I'm taking this call in school right now.
So how did, I mean, I know that, at some point, like I told you before we came out, we're going to have you on, we're going to talk more in depth because we don't have a ton of time today. But I mean, just real briefly, I mean, how did you end up falling in love with jazz? I mean, was it like Oscar Peterson, listening to those classic recordings and just
Yeah.
career?
Yeah, so my grandparents played me a Sinatra video one day, and I immediately became obsessed with Sinatra and the whole Rat Pack, but Sinatra specifically. And still, like, to me, that's perfect music. Whenever I really need to listen to something or go back to, something to compare it to, or just need to clear my head, I mean, it's perfect music. There's not much more I could say about it.
Yeah.
So I've always been obsessed with Sinatra for as long as I've known about it. And as I was exploring more of the Rat Pack and the musicians that he was around and he associated himself with, I found the Tony Bennett and Bill Evans albums.
Oh yeah.
And when I heard Bill Evans play, I was like, wow, I play piano. This is really what I want to do, or I want to try to play like this.
Yeah.
So ever since hearing Bill Evans, and then I heard Oscar Peterson around the same time as well. And that was another one of those, like, my mind's blown. Like, this is incredible. Like, if I can try to do this on the piano, like, that's what I want to do. And ever since then, I've been so lucky to hear so many of my heroes and be around so many of my heroes, like Herbie Hancock, who's always been a huge influence on me.
Sure.
And just something I love doing is listening to records and checking out new things. So, every time I hear a new record, or every time I find something new that I hadn't heard before, I kind of like re-fall in love with it. But I have so much love for this music.
Well, that is something that's very rare, obviously, these days, especially with somebody in your generation. So, I mean, but we need people like you in order to keep the music pushing forward and continuing to create and continue to expand stuff. And I love the fact that you're collaborating with somebody like Jeff and the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, because I'm sure you've played with them before or heard them or whatever, but I mean, the guys.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of them. Yeah.
I mean, those are the top dudes in Chicago for sure. So you're going to have a great
Yeah.
time. Have you ever played in Chicago with your group?
I've never played in Chicago with my group. I did the NYO program this summer with Sean Jones that Carnegie Hall puts together a bunch of young musicians. And we did play in Chicago. We played right on the Navy Pier this summer.
Yep.
But this is my first time actually playing in Chicago, playing inside in Chicago. I guess, yeah, this is my Chicago debut.
Well, it's a good debut to have. And
yeah, it doesn't get much better than this.
Let's try to get you back with your group tuned in 2023, and we'll have a good conversation about that as well, because obviously, Chicago's got such a legendary jazz scene here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Legendary clubs. You probably listen to Oscar Peterson live at the London House a million times.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so, Miles Davis at the Plug Nickel.
There you
He's
go.
One of my favorites. Yeah. So
yeah.
many incredible Chicago musicians and.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, so, all right. So let me wrap this thing up so that I can get everybody all the info. Brandon Goldberg, you are coming into town. You're performing with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, December 4th, 4:30 p.m. at the Studebaker, which is at 410 South Michigan. It's in the old Fine Arts Building. Everybody knows where that is. And I always like to mention this when I mention this, Brandon, is parking is very easy. Just park in Grant Park right across the street and walk right upstairs. Not expensive, very easy. Get a Park Whiz, get a Spot Hero. Take care of it all yourself. And also the Chicago Jazz Orchestra is also, in addition to the musical tribute to Charlie Brown Christmas, they're also going to reprise their Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn Jazz Nutcracker, which they did last year. So you're going to get a double bill on this one for everybody that's coming. I mean, it's going to be a heck of an afternoon. It's the first Chicago Jazz Orchestra concert of the season. I think it might be the only one in a theater venue, so you don't want to miss this. And Brandon, I look forward to having you back on. I want to tell everybody, if you want to get more information on Brandon, BrandonGoldbergPiano.com. check him out there, get his recordings. And I'm trying to keep it short because you and I could talk for about a half an hour because I got a ton of questions, but I'm wrapping it up and then I'm going to have you back on when we get closer to having you back come into Chicago. We're going to talk all about your background and everything else. But I appreciate you jumping on. And I appreciate you ditching class to talk to me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And hopefully everybody checks this out. It's going to be at the fineartsbuilding.com. And also I'll link everything up on chicagojazz.com. And as I always say, thanks for watching. And until next time, hopefully I will see you all somewhere out on the scene.